Welcome to The Fix,
the new way to get your copy reviewed by two former copy chiefs.
because whether you're an aspiring copywriter or you've been in the industry for decades,
The best way to improve your work isn't to read books, blog posts, or online guides.
is to see real writing, your writing, being reviewed and improved in front of your eyes.
And that's the goal of The Fix, to bring you inside a virtual writer's room
And watch along as we review, edit and rewrite real copy.
from real writers like you. So let's get straight into this week's episode. And remember, if you like what you see here,
Please share The Fix with anyone you think would find it valuable. It is completely free.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Fix with Glenn Fisher and the other guy, which is how I referred to in an email from a subscriber this week, which I enjoyed. Said, Glenn, I'm loving your work on The Fix with the other guy. And I thought, that's the role I was born to play.
as it should be, as it should be.
We should have subtitles at the bottom or captions that introduce us as Glenn Fisher and the other guy. Doomed to live in your shadow. Anyway, speaking of messages we got from subscribers this week, thank you to everybody who wrote to me after I sent a note out last week. I mentioned that my son was in hospital. I got some nice messages back. Thank you very much for all those messages. He's fine now. It's nothing to worry about too much. He has, if you want the backstory, he's only 2, poor little lad. And he has, you can't have asthma when you're 2, but he has all the symptoms of asthma. So that was our second stretch in the hospital. 8 nights we ended up doing. 8 nights we did in November as well. Sounds a lot worse than it is, but it's actually weirdly great to come away from that and get into the world of copy. It's actually really hard to write and keep your focus. So the stuff that we do at The Fix is a great kind of antidote, really, because you can come away, look at a piece of copy, and you can kind of lose yourself in it for a little while. So thank you to everybody who wrote to me about that. I really appreciated it, and he's fine now. We have had a lot of different messages about writer's block. Now, some of them are really interesting. We're going to do a whole episode on writer's block next week because there's still messages coming in from people, and we wanted to kind of properly look through them and have a think about that because it's a kind of interesting topic, dealing with it, getting around it. Is it even a real thing? Had a few people talking about that. So do write in with your experiences or opinions on writer's block, and we'll cover that next week. And there's various other bits and bobs that we want to cover in upcoming episodes. But Glenn, something in the mailbox caught your eye, and you wanted to base this week's episode all around it. So why don't you kind of...
Yeah, well, it was I'm glad to hear the kiddies are well, by the way. What I was going to say, it's like when they do Prime Minister's Question Time, and like the opposition says, I'd like to align my thoughts with that, and then I'm going to attack you. So, but yeah, no, one of the emails stuck out to me because I thought it was just something that a lot of copywriters, whether you're in an agency, whether you're working for a company, or whether you are freelance, you will undoubtedly have experienced this at some point. And Pressy in the email, it was really all about how you deal with difficult clients. How do you deal with difficult feedback? Just getting feedback itself is often quite difficult. It's something we do at The Fix, and I mean, you know, we're always kind of, there's a little bit about us that still, after like decades of doing it, it's not nice to tell people, oh, you can improve this, you can do this, you can change this. It is always about improving, and I'll say that as an overall thing. But I was really interested in this. I've dealt with this. I still to this day, I don't have like evil, horrible clients because I'm lucky enough that I can kind of pick and choose who I work with. But sometimes the nature of any copywriter, you will come across people who and what is a bad client? We could kind of defend that, but I'll define it for us. It's someone who probably doesn't quite know what they want yet. That will ultimately, if you keep digging down, that will be why you're having trouble with any like difficult client. So you've got to understand it's not necessarily that they're being, as I say, evil or trying to hurt you. It's something that they're not being able to express themselves, and maybe your copy isn't quite expressing things how you thought they would. So I wanted to explore that. I've got some kind of processes I go through and some advice for how to prevent that happening. But Nick, I wanted to ask you first, what was your experience working? I know you work with a few different clients, some within the same kind of company and framework, but some outside of that. What's your kind of client relationship 101 that you'd give to people?
Yeah, do you know what? You actually have to think about it a lot more than I thought I would when I first went freelance. I mean, like you say, I do most, the vast majority of my work is for the Agora companies all around the world. So it's the same culture, people that I've known for a long time. Lots of them are my friends, So I'm fortunate in that regard. I do have other bits and bobs that I do, which we can talk about later, perhaps. But you do have to police the boundary where, well, how do I want to be with these people? What will I accept from other people? And by that, I mean, what sort of feedback, behavior, demands, whatever, what's acceptable and what isn't, and where that boundary is has to be policed. That's the word I use. How do I maintain? Well, no, because there's some things that you say, well, that's fine. And other things you say, well, I'm not going to accept that from somebody. So how do I make that clear without becoming argumentative or killing the relationship? And of course, if you're working for quite big companies, the client is multiple people. So the client, for instance, for me, is generally the publisher of that business. I'm going to have a strong working relationship with them. They're in the Agora world. They're going to have an appreciation of copy. They're going to know exactly what it is they want, or they're going to know good copy when they see it, or we're going to be able to talk the same language about those kinds of things. But of course, there's a whole constellation of other people, marketers, compliance officers becoming a much bigger part of it, editors, and all those people are the client too. They might not be the company owner or the publisher or the person running that division, but they're all people I have to work with. So there's a sort of another level to client management, which is how do you maintain your relationships with all of those people? But fundamentally, it all comes down to that word, relationship. How do you build a relationship that works for you and for them? You don't want to be an idiot. You don't want them to think that you're difficult to work with, but equally, you want to build a relationship where you do feel happy pushing back around certain things. Now, I'm far more interested in your sort of views on this, because you work with a much bigger array of people. And I know that you work with people, for instance, who, long copy, for instance, might not be something they've tried before. They might be unsure about. And therefore, I think really that's a more interesting topic, because how do you convince somebody that that's the right way to go and all things like that? So why don't you give us your views?
Strap on your cannon and your flamethrower, just go into the office like that. I'm glad you said the word relationship. I wrote it down while you were talking, because you kept hitting on that word. And I think when it comes to dealing with clients, full stop, whether it's a difficult client or what have you, it is all about building relationships. Obviously, when you put the work into a relationship, like any relationship in life, the more you put in and the longer you contribute to it and nourish it, the more you will get out of it. For instance, in your case, Nick, you've got these long-standing relationships, so that you have got a shorthand with them, you have got an understanding, you have got boundaries already set. All of the things that you need to do to prevent a bad client or a difficult relationship are alleviated if you put the time in and do that. As you say, I work with a whole range of people now, and as I say, I work within the kind of direct response world and the indirect response world. So I might be writing a 10,000 word piece, or I might be writing a 10-word piece, and it's a completely different expectations that come from the clients in the case of what they want, content-wise, if you like, the actual copy they want. But interestingly, or perhaps uninterestingly, depending on what you hope is an answer, I say from the years I've worked with Agora, and I know that kind of relationship with a long copy publisher or what have you, it's actually the same thing. Everybody wants, like any client, as I say, just wants to express their ideas in a smart, intelligent, engaging and creative way. Like that's ultimate, and they want to make sales. We can have a long debate on whether they want to do anything else, like get people to donate or whatever. It's all selling. We just assume between us we understand that, but everybody wants to just make this out and get the right thing. The problem I find is that, as I said earlier on, is that it really comes down to people being able to express themselves. And as I say, the majority of like trouble or challenges I'll run into with any clients that I work with and kind of get a bit of, like, not negative feedback, but feedback that requires clarification and like doesn't understand, is because I've not expressed what I assumed they'd want me to express, or they've not expressed themselves. So it is all about expression. That comes to briefs, which we'll come to in a minute. But for me, as soon as I saw this email, and the first thing I thought about, and my first piece of advice, and I assume you'll agree with this, unless you have a lot of deep-seated problems, Nick, and you've been holding this down, and we can have that discussion in this episode. But no feedback from any client is a personal attack on you. And I think as a copywriter, definitely if you're like freelancing, you're working out in the world, when people say, this isn't quite right, this isn't like as good as it could be, or this thing, though it feels like it because you have produced that copy, it is not a personal attack on you. And I'm sure, I admit, I felt this when I get a thing, I'm like, oh, get lost, like, how dare you like infringe my creativity and tell me I'm wrong. It's not that you've done it wrong, or like they're not trying to say you're a bad copywriter. It's that there's something in the way they want to express their ideas and their product or their service isn't correlating with how you have done it. Because you are a copywriter, because you are good, you have the power to actually fix it and make it stronger and draw out what they really want to express. So you just need to take a moment. And my first bit of advice, when anybody gets that bad information, just take a minute, scream out the window, like do whatever you need to like get over anger and stuff, but like very quickly to be able to deal with that, like the changes, the feedback or whatever, and to make sure you give yourself time to develop the relationship with that client. You need to get any personal like animosity out of it. It's not you, it's me, kind of thing, or whatever breakup cliche you want to do. But that's a big thing for me.
That's very true. One thing I would say is that the client that tells you they don't like something is actually quite easy to deal with in some ways, because they're being direct and honest. And so it's worth remembering that we'll scrap it, we'll come up with something new. You know, that's our job. We come up with ideas, and most of them are rejected first of all by us, then by our peers, and then by the market. You know, we live in a world of rejection. So come up with something new. Just put a line through it and come up with something else. More often than not, you'll come up with something else just as good or better. And, you know, how do you know it's the best thing ever? So you can be precious about it, but it's easy to just be like, well, it's my job to come up with something else. What's hard is when somebody clearly doesn't like what you've done, but won't tell you that. And so they're kind of, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Kind of passive aggression in the comments panel, usually on a Word document, you know, picking away at it. And then what you actually have to ask people to do is say, you don't like it, do you? Should we kill it? Should we just not do this? Should we do something else? You actually have to tell them what to tell you, because it's when something is unsaid, that's where the problems start, right? Because you do this and they clearly think something but won't say it. And it's hard to have an honest relationship with somebody when they won't be honest with you. So that's something that's worth it. If somebody clearly doesn't like something but won't tell you, then put the words in the mouth for them and say, hey, would you prefer me to go away and come up with some new ideas? Because I don't think you like this. And they'll probably say, yeah. And then that's a resolution. And actually that helps bring you together, doesn't it? Because they think, oh, that's fine. I didn't need to be dishonest or hide that from. So keep that in mind. They might not always tell you. And the people that do tell you tend to be easier to work with because you know where you stand with them. So keep that in mind. Because to be honest, we kind of covered my second point there, because I was going to say you do need to take
So once you've got rid of that kind of personal like anger and thingy, you need to take on that. Yeah, it might not be the best thing. Like you've got someone there. As copywriters, we know our biggest the biggest boon, the biggest advantage we have is being able to check copy with people before it goes out into the world. If you don't check it with people before it goes out into the world, you're putting all the risk on the final piece, and that's kind of stupid and dumb. From personally, because if it fails, then you're not going to get as much many gigs ongoing, but also from a business point of view, it's just a silly thing to do. So you get the chance to test it with, maybe you get your partner to look at it, or maybe you get your peers to look at it. But someone here, it might be, I don't know, a marketer or whoever the client is, who maybe isn't a copywriter, they're looking at it and having emotional reactions to it, more real and with less baggage than a copywriting peer might have, or someone who wants to prove themselves in the writer's room and say, oh yes, well, I understand exactly what you're trying to do here, but you've not done that. That's all well and good, but it's not really the emotional reaction that a natural reader will have to that. So do take on board that stuff. As Nick said, you try and rewrite it, try and come up with another idea. So I agree with that. My next thing though, and I think this is, again, as everything I seem to say these days is linked, it's a bit philosophical, but I think it's a practical thing as well. And again, it comes back to what Nick, you said at the beginning about the relationships. You are ultimately, if you just zoom out a bit, all of these things that you're just trying to develop a relationship. And if you can get with a client who might seem like a difficult client at the moment, but if you can kind of keep persevering with that because they're a good client and you want to keep them and develop that relationship, then you're onto a winner. So what I would encourage you to remember is, if you sit there as a copywriter and we sit there thinking, I mean, I often lay in the bath, but less about that for now, but thinking about, I said that like the bath was here, that was my couch. I do sometimes lay there, but I do also lay in the bath. There's kind of common knowledge on the internet. But anyway, wherever you do your thinking, you spend time thinking this. You're thinking all the angles, you're thinking about X, you're thinking about Y, you are thinking, all right, well, the tone of voice needs to be like that, that needs to engage the reader in that, that's doing that. You're employed for that exact reason, that you have all of this learning, the whole Picasso thing where it might take 2 minutes to draw the painting, but you've spent 40 years understanding it, how to do that. The person on the other end of that copy, the client, probably hasn't done that. They've just looked and gone, all right, that doesn't do that to me straight away, or I'm not getting it. Or they might be trying to bring baggage to it or whatever. So you need to remember that. You need to give them a little bit of respect, is it? I don't know, but give them time and maybe explain what your thinking is. Now, of course, that kind of contradicts their emotional reaction to it. But sometimes when people are searching in the dark, whatever, you need to help them along. And as you're saying, Nick, help them to say what they really think. Now, if you start explaining what you were trying to do with that copy, like, I was trying to engage this person here, I was using this language to do this, this is why I framed that there, I'm going to do this bit later on, blah, blah, blah. That will, it will not only help to teach that client more about what you're doing in your brain, your thought process, but it will also start to give them the tools to be able to better reflect what it is and express what they want to see from you. So if they say, oh, right, oh, I understand why you're doing that, but I associate that word with X or what have you, maybe then it's just a tweak of a word rather than rewriting the whole thing or what have you. So as much as possible, think the long game, think nourishing these relationships and building a relationship with a client, and try and explain your thinking. Certainly in the kind of indirect world, you probably end up like, you don't send your working out when you submit the copy that you're doing. It depends on everything. But and it's the same in writing a long copy sales letter. You're not going to send the billions of pages of research you did to go, this is why I put this as my main idea kind of thing. You just send what's the copy is.
That's true, but you may present your thesis. So for instance, I'll give you an example from something that I'm working on now. So it's about cryptocurrencies, which loads of the financial world's, very fixated on that market. So I have this theory that most people still don't own Bitcoin, but wish they did. So they've heard about it. And the silent majority in the market are the people who heard about it years ago, either didn't buy or didn't buy enough. And therefore, they're somewhere in the emotional space of being bitter or disappointed, or all of these price rises that we see all over the place just make them kick themselves. They're not in a FOMO sense, just, oh, why didn't I do that? Okay, for instance, that's my working theory. I would present my copy to the people that I'm working with I would state that my working theory is this, because that's almost like, and if this copy doesn't work, maybe I'm wrong, but at least you might put your thesis out. Yeah. I think people are worried about X, so I want to write about Y. That can at least help you. So that's not your workings, but it's your thesis. It's the basis on which you've written. That can be useful.
Kind of justification almost. And I thinking about it, sometimes I will just make a little note, is just to kind of clarify. Normally, if I'm going, a lot of people hire me to be experimental. So I'll do the kind of core, like, this is your bread and butter stuff. This is what you expect and you get not from a normal copyright. But then it's like, right, go and be weird. So it's like, okay, here's why I think this weird one might be a good play, even though it seems strange. But here's the thinking. So I do that.
But that should be brief, shouldn't it? That should be very brief, concise. Here's my thinking.
Exactly. But then obviously, if it comes back and it's still not there, and I think it comes down to, you are the copywriter, and it is your job to write the best copy that will work for that client, that you believe will work for that client. Now, of course, you are also hired by them, so you are hired to produce what they require. But there's just a fine line, and I do think it helps with ongoing relationship and longer relationships if you just have the slight confidence, I would say, to really to sometimes softly challenge and explain, but this is why this is the better thing to do. Obviously, don't just say it's better than what you're doing or whatever, but to try and develop their understanding of the work you're doing. As I say, it will just help you in the long term anyway. And for people who are sat there going, oh, I don't know how to deal with this, people are saying this, you need to explain stuff and do that afterwards. But sometimes a little précis in there will be useful, as you say, Nick. And I think that leads me to so that's how I don't know if you have any thoughts on how you deal with that when you get that back. I think that's ultimately, you move the personal out of the way, take time to think, is there a way I can improve this? And if there isn't, if that's your take, explain why and try and bring more out of the client to try and understand why it isn't tying up with their thoughts.
Yeah, I think those are all good ways of doing it. A couple of things I would do on top of that. If something irritates me, I will not talk to them about it until it's no longer irritating me. Just take emotion out of it. You will not achieve anything if you're emotional or upset. So very rarely happens to me. Actually, no, that's not true. I get pissed off all the time. But very rarely do I respond in that mode. I think, okay. And sometimes I'll leave it a week. Sometimes it might be a day. Depends on what's going on. But I found that when I ran a company, dealing with people was what worked me up. And I found that, the way to deal with people is to be cold as ice when you do. Don't be upset, because what's the point in that? It's like anything. Once you've lost your temper or you've become emotional, you won't communicate properly. So draw the sting from the situation if you can. Just go cold for a few hours. Let it settle. The second thing is rely on your core skill. If you've got something difficult to say, write it down. You're a writer. Don't go into, so if something has upset you and you want to try and explain why it has, or, maybe you want to say, this upset me the way you said that, or, I feel a little bit, sometimes being honest like that can work. Obviously depends on who you, write it down and redraft it and communicate what you're trying to say to your client in a using your core skills. Be personable, authentic, write to them, because I would say I'm a reasonably good communicator speaking wise, although I wasn't in that sentence that I just said. But if something's difficult, write it down, because you can redraft it, you can get it right. And again, I used to use that with thorny situations when I was running a company. If something was great news and brilliant, and somebody was doing fantastic, well, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to just go and talk to them. If I was having an issue,
saving your collected letters to me for letters from Nick, a posthumous publication when my poetry career is finished.
But it's worth remembering we are writers. Let's rely on our skills as writers to communicate with our client, and to an extent, let's use our copywriting techniques. We're not going to say, dear client, and then stop telling them a story, stop telling them a story about hollyhocks and hibiscus. No, yeah. Or we might write it down and get it right and sleep on it and redraft it so that we make our point properly. And I think that's worth remembering too, because there's no good being emotional, and there's no good being like, let's talk about this right now. Because whenever somebody says that to me, I always think, oh God, this is going to be, tempers are going to be frayed. What are we going to accomplish doing this now? No, you need to find somebody else to go and moan to, wife, girlfriend, partner, friend, neighbor, mirror, whoever it is, and get that out, and then come back to your desk and deal with it in a cold, emotionless way, like I do with you.
Yeah, and I was going to make an improper joke there, which I won't. Which shows there is at least some small self-editing in my mind. Most of it comes out, but I didn't. Yeah, so that's kind of how you react to it. What I would say though, and we kind of link to this, but as a way to kind of sum up the thoughts of it, it is about relationships, but also what I would advise to correct in the future, if you're able to, there's two strands to this. Number one, and you'll find loads of stuff, maybe we'll do an episode on this in the future as an isolated issue, but you need to try and get a better brief, because I used to be fast and loose with briefs and not really just tell me what it is and I'll figure it out. That's cool if you're kind of involved in the business and everything, which kind of I wasn't at that time. But when you're hired and you're trying to take someone's world, ultimately, I work with clients who are it's their entire business, it's their baby that they're getting you to sell. You need to, and they've got marketing plans, they've got business plans, they've got 5-year plans, they've got 10-year plans, they've got angles they want to go down, all this kind of, you need to work out where your role is in that. So the more detail you can get in a brief, the better. At the same time, once like a piece of copy, once you've got a lot of detail, then you need to get that down to a very simple line as well. But that's why we'll say briefs for another time. But do try and, your chances are, if you've got a lot of animosity building with the client, it's probably because there's stuff missing in that brief, from my experience. So have a look at that. And also, it's kind of the same, but if you, and a lot of people realistically in the business world aren't going to bother with that, but get involved earlier if you're able to. Nick, I'm sure you're the same. You still are with that when you talk with editors and everything. But you need to get into the idea as early as you can, so that you know what everybody in the room is thinking and expecting. It's just a different way of getting the brief, really. But volunteer yourself. Say I'm up for, don't feel like you just have to get it all and send it to me and I'll just deal with it. I'll commit some more time to come and understand what it is that you want, because, and how you want to charge for that or whatever, I don't know, but personally, you generally find that the more time you put in early on, the less time it will take to write stuff anyway. So it kind of works out anyway that you'll spend more time getting angry and going back and forth with changes, and therefore probably lose time on the money you're making or whatever. If you put the time in early on and get in there early, then I would suggest that you'll probably be able to write the copy with a lot less changes anyway. So I would say try and tweak the brief if you can in future with that client, and get in there earlier, which are both utterly dependent on the relationship you build with clients, and it is all about building relationships. We could probably do a checklist or a run through, what I'm doing now, but of ways you can actually better build relationships with clients. There are actual techniques and ways of doing that. It's not just about turning up and smiling and saying, hi, how are you doing? Let me buy you a pint kind of thing. There are loads of different ways you can do that. So maybe that's a platform we can look at in the future. Well,
the first one is to listen to them. This is generally the best thing you can do. So in the Agora world, or the information publishing world, generally you have a publisher and then you have an editor of the product. So your client is kind of both people, or, you're going to write for the editor, but you're going to be paid by the publisher. So you need to, the editor in this case, the person whose product developed the trading product or written the book or whatever it might be, you have to build a relationship with them. And the way I will start that is I get them to tell me their story. I usually ask them to record a video of just their origin story. The reason I like to do a video is it stops me from interrupting them, talking about myself, which is obviously my favorite subject. But it's great. I mean, because people want to tell their stories. They want to be listened to. And I always say, don't try and come up with a promotional idea. That's my job. You just talk. What's interesting you? What's bothered you in the past? How have you got here? What you're looking at? All these things. And sometimes people will talk to you for hours and hours and hours. I've worked with one chap in Australia who recorded this like 3.5 hour video. I drank most of a bottle of wine, but it was fantastic. He had such a brilliant story. And I was like, there is so much of this I never would have got to hear if I hadn't have asked you to do this. But that's how you start, isn't it? Because then I wrote up his story and
that's how Crocodile Dundee franchise was born.
Well, people want to be listened to, so listen to them. It's the same. It's a cliche to talk about relationships and then compare them to other relationships in your life. Of course it is, but all those cliches are true. It's like a date with someone. Not that I've been on a date.
Your poor wife can only speak to you through videos.
Yeah.
The common. I don't know if everybody knows that. I'm sorry for revealing that. But
I ask her to tell her origin story almost every time I see her, even though we've been together for 15, 16 years. But, listen to them. They want to be listened to. They want to be heard, same as anybody. So start there, and that's a good basis to, to start to build trust. And no amount of investment in that phase of the job will always pay off big time. So I'd never worry about, oh God, I'm spending so much time, because no, that's where you're going to get a good promotion out of that. And in a perfect world, you might get multiple jobs because that person will like working with you and think they listened to me. They really got stuck into what they do. They're really trying to work out how to sell this product. Let's go with them again. And so it becomes an ongoing thing.
Yeah. So just remember that if you're dealing with bad, with challenging clients, bad briefs, all that kind of stuff, just remember it's not just you. Every copywriter, no matter what level they're at, even the boss of the company will, if they were writing copy, they would get feedback on their stuff. So it's not a personal thing. It's just about figuring out the best way to express your ideas and their ideas and get them in line. So
can I ask you a question, Glenn?
Yeah.
So your answers have been skewed towards getting feedback that's thorny, difficult. I sort of talked about, people maybe not saying what they thought.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you work with people where it's the opposite problem? Because that, to me, would be much worse, where you don't get any feedback. You don't get any sort of sense of, so you don't have anything to gauge your own copy on it. Does that ever happen much?
Yeah, I mean, you get the ones where it's like, this is great, thanks very much, that's exactly what we needed. Sometimes like that's just kind of cool, but I'm trying to think of those ones. That's usually because I've already got a relationship and I know where that's going, and it's kind of an ongoing thing. When people are polite and not feeling it, maybe, there's a certain just business sense where it's like, right, well, if you're saying that's okay and you're paying me and going away, that's fine. I'd rather you tell me. What I will do is always encourage people, if it's someone new who I am starting a relationship with, try and encourage them to give me feedback and make myself open and available for that, because I'd say it's about making your product better. How do I do that? Actually thinking about it again, it is cliche, but it's back to that relationship. As you said, I will always try and start everything off with opportunity for that person to, in the Zoom world in the modern day, it's usually a Zoom. I try and see them if I can, but at least like an hour just chatting about it and understanding it and getting that there, because it comes across slightly arrogant, but if I do that, I feel like I can work out what they want much better than I would if it was just a blind cold situation kind of thing. That said, I can also then figure out if they react going, oh yeah, that's good, like, it's like, no, you're not quite happy, like, how can we make that better, kind of thing. I always remember, I think it was Joe Schriefer was saying, like, you need to watch people for their, like, yeah, kind of the eye, like the, yeah, that's really good kind of thing. Like, and it's like, no, you don't think that. Like, there's a physical reaction. So if you can pitch the copy in person, that's the best advantage. But you can generally get a vibe for when people come back with like, oh, this is really good, this has hit the nail on the head, or what have you. But I try and encourage like feedback on everything, and almost make the client actually do a little review anyway, so it challenges them to, so I can see, oh no, you've got stuff to work with there. I feel morally like fine with that, that's cool. Whether you liked it all is not my problem, kind of thing. You've got stuff to work with, I've done my job. But so it's just, again, it's always different. But I guess if they just come back silently and go, I'm like, all right, okay. And now I might not never ever hear from them again, I guess, is the thing. But
I have had it where, I mean, again, it's always where there's a lack of communication or a lack of honesty. To me, that's a lack of honesty. Sounds like people are lying, just, you know, not enough engagement on that level. So I won't say who this is for, although I will tell you afterwards.
That seems unfair to you.
A couple of times I've worked with somebody where copy all looks good. It's a script, so it's got to be filmed. And then the filming day comes around, and I wasn't there in the studio. And afterwards, I get a phone call. So we had to change quite a lot of the copy in the studio because this person wasn't happy with it. Okay, fine. And generally, it's always been dealt with, and it's, you know, always resolved itself. But that's always difficult, because I find myself then in that situation where I think, why didn't you tell me you didn't like that? I would have changed it. So it's trying to, I think.
Well, it's why you have to develop the relationships, because the industry standard, and not just industry standard, human standard, is for avoidance of conflict. We all want to avoid conflict. Very few of us want to get into conflict. So that client who's hired you and has to pay you or what have you, and you've sent their thing, you, no matter what experience you've got, you're the expert in this, and you're supposed to be like, oh, brilliant. And they get it and go, you've not expressed what I wanted you to express there. They might feel they don't want conflict, so they go, okay, I'll write that off to a bad experience. I'll hire a different copywriter, or I'll do it myself, or what have you. And that's a shame, because as a good copywriter, and I'm speaking to like good copywriters to try and encourage a better level of copy in the world, what I would rather, and I'd actually take it as a like financial hit. I don't like, it depends, if you're taking the mick, I'll charge more time, but like, I'd rather go, oh right, okay, not happy with that, okay, let's try and work out why then, because I do genuinely want to get the best copy for you, and that's my genuine requirement and request, because then, like, on any level, that's good for me. It means I get testimonial, it means I get more work from you in the future, it means your product, which I've presumably taken on because I think it's a good product, gets out there more. So all these positive, but it's just the human nature is to avoid conflict and do that thing. And I think there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of clients out there who have just gone, oh, all right, okay, like, yeah, we got stung. In fact, I've just taken on a new client who, they were so wary of employing a copywriter, and especially at my cost, and that they kind of put me in front of the board to interview me about a very small job that I was like, guys, I can like do this in a, like, it's a simple thing. But because they'd been stung, and because they'd had someone who had kind of done that, they were so wary of doing it, and then employing another copywriter to do it again and redo it because they'd got it wrong the first time. Now, hopefully, I've set in motion a relationship with that client whereby if I don't hit the mark the first time, we understand that, okay, that's cool. Like, how was that different? And if it gets to a point where they literally can't express themselves, say, well, you're actually contradicting what you want. You probably need to work out how to sell this product in a better way, or what the product is. And you'll find so often that you actually get deeper into the business of understanding what they're trying to do. And that's where you shift and become more than just a copywriter. more than just a writer. You become an ideas person, you become a business consultant, you become someone who is helping them understand why. Because you are selling the product. You need to sell the product. If you haven't got what you need to sell the product, you need to speak to the owner. So it's just worth it. And that, again, that's just a really good relationship if you can get to that stage.
Perhaps we're hitting on something here, which is actually that your client might feel as intimidated by you as you potentially do by them. You might be the unapproachable one, or you might be the one that people might feel like they're walking on eggshells. Perhaps not you, but you as a representative of the copywriting industry. They may have had bad experiences, almost certainly have for some people. In fact, if you're a business owner and you've had bad experiences with copywriters, write to us with those experiences and we'll unpick them. Because that would be a fun show to do. But
Definitely.
we've all been there. So
it's also why I, in the bath, when I'm thinking, I have a spider there, because the spider is as afraid of me as I am of it. And so it's just constantly reminding me of my client relationships.
But there's a serious point we can make, which is that, okay, so let's bring it all together. That may well be the case. It's this unusual relationship. We want feedback, constructive feedback, but that can really quickly be misconstrued as conflict that people want to avoid. And therefore it all gets repressed on both sides and sort of it becomes this subtext that's horrible to work under, right? So as the copywriter, the best thing to do is get out in front of that process and set expectations and try and control the process from your side as much as you can. So for instance, I'll give you an example of what I do. If I'm working with somebody new, in the initial meeting, I'll tell them, here's how I'd like it to work. So what I would usually say is, I'll go away, I'll research the product, I'll talk to the editor and I'll write something. I'll present those things to you. If you don't like them, fine. You don't have to pay me anything. You don't have to, that's all completely free. If you want me to rework them, I'll rework them. I still won't charge you. If you like one of them and want to take them forward, then we'll do that promotion and here's what it will cost. And then every company has a different payment structure. So I go with what they want because I don't really mind. But there's a few ways that works well, because one, it sets their expectations of what I'm going to do, puts me in control, but not in a megalomaniac way, just saying, here's how I think it should work. They're welcome to say otherwise. And also it kind of shows them that, like, look, I don't want you to be unhappy. An unhappy client is worse than no client. What's the point? So, okay, let's de-risk it for you. I feel confident in my ability to write something good. But I'm sure there'll come an occasion where I just can't come up with anything. And at that point, I'd rather they say, we don't like any of this. Shall we not do anything? And I'll say, yeah. And so probably going to be a relief to me to actually kill that project and say, perhaps the next idea I can work on that. But by doing all of those things, you're kind of laying out how you want to work and you're setting the expectation of what you're going to do, what you expect from them, when the feedback will come. All of those things are going to be healthy. And just by doing it that way and being really open and honest about how you want to work, you instantly set the dynamic of the relationship for them to be honest back, and let them know at the beginning that if you hate it, you just tell me. I don't mind. It's fine. Not everything I come up with is going to be good. So if you don't like it, you just tell me. We either do something else or we part as friends. And just trying to bring those things to the surface is probably the way forward. Try and be as honest and open as you can, and then you're going to get that back from people more often than not. Where you repress it and you're not open and honest, they might not be back. And I think that's where a lot of the problems come.
Oh, definitely.
I think. I mean, some people are just dicks. Maybe I am. But
those and negotiating with a gun on the table is not good.
Yeah. I mean,
if you try and be like really open and go, no, honestly, if you like it all the time, just a gun laid there.
Well, of course, you had to go in front of the board to be interviewed for a new project. What you didn't say is that you were in the bath for that, didn't you? You insisted that a bathtub
Of course. That's part of how we will work. That's the how we will work.
You were carried into the boardroom in a bath, like Cleopatra on a...
Surprising how much tax write-off you can get from submergible, waterproof copyright equipment.
Well, we've got to the point where we're not being useful anymore, but I think the more people write in with specific questions or even, I think we can broaden the remit of the fix. If you've got a problem with a specific client, no names, obviously we're not going to, but you want to write to us about, such and such said this, what would you have done? Or how can I deal with this situation? I think it's going to be riffing on the themes that we've explored here today, but you can always write in with stuff like that, because I've got some great stories of review meetings gone wrong. So there's plenty more mileage in this. The bad clients, but I'm not going to get into that, because I'll probably get in trouble with someone who recognized themselves and said, that was me you're talking about.
Invariably. Cool.
You weren't in the bath.
You said you'd be fully naked.
Right.
Yeah.
Shall we wrap things up?
Leave it there. I'll let you wrap it up.
Okay, so do write into us with copy to review challenges you're having, problems that you want solving. Well, like I said in my note last week, it could be as simple as, is this subject line better than this one? You don't have to send a full piece of copy if you don't have that. It can be a creative challenge. It can be an individual piece of copy that, a very specific element of a piece of writing that you're working on. We're happy to look at anything. And we will be back with you next week to talk about writer's block and whatever it is that's going on. And maybe, do you know what? Before the end of the year, I'm going to make you do an episode of The Fix from the bath.
Yes.
I don't actually know how to pixelate things, so we'll have to get a video guy in.
I'll just hold Pablo in front of me. He needs a bath. That's my next job, is bathing Pablo.
Just to be clear, Pablo is Glenn's dog, not his child or his neighbour. Or
I believe more people probably know that Pablo's name than your name, being the other guy.
I'm the other guy, and everyone knows.
And then Pablo.
That's right. That's the thing. Let's sign off there. Thank you very much for joining us this week, and we will see you all next week.
And there we have it. We hope you got something valuable out of today's episode of The Fix.
Maybe it sparked an idea or two for your next writing project. Maybe it triggered a new headline, opening line, or story to tell your reader.
Maybe it inspired you to scrap what you have and start over. Or maybe it made you want to submit your current work in progress for a little constructive feedback. If that is the case, send your copy to us at feedback@thefixcopywriting.com. Or if you don't want us to review a specific piece of writing, send us a problem you're trying to solve,
Or a challenge you want input on, and we'll do our best to help.
And remember, if you like The Fix, please do share it with other writers, business owners, and marketers.